Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading Holes again. This one should be a little longer, it's 21 pages because I can do quick math. And yeah, so without further ado, let's start this episode. Chapter 19. He was awakened one night by a strange noise. At first he thought it might have been some kind of animal, and it frightened him. But as sleep cleared his head, he realized that the noise was coming from the cot next to him. Squid was crying. "You okay?" Stanley whispered. Squid's head jerked around. He sniffed and caught his breath. "Yeah, I'm fine," he whispered, and sniffed again. In the morning, Stanley asked Squid if he was feeling better. What are you, my mother?" asked Squid. Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. "I got allergies, okay?" Squid said. "Okay," said Stanley. "You open your mouth again and I'll break your jaw." Stanley kept his mouth shut most of the time. He didn't talk too much to any of the boys, afraid he might say the wrong thing. They called him caveman and all that, but he wouldn't forget that they were dangerous too. They were all here for a reason. As Mr. Sir would say, it wasn't Girl Scout camp. Stanley was thankful that there was no racial problems. X-Ray, Armpit, and Zero were black. He, Squid, and Zigzag were white. Magnet was Hispanic. On the lake, they were all the same reddish-brown color, the color of dirt. He looked up from his hole to see the water truck and a trail dust cloud. His canteen was almost half-quarter full. He quickly drank it down and then took his place in line behind Magnet in front of Zero. The air was thick with heat, dust, and exhaust fumes. Mr. Sir filled the canteens. The truck pulled away. Stanley was back in his hole, shovel in hand, when he heard Magnet call out, "Anybody want some sunflower seeds?" Magnet was standing at ground level, holding a sack of seeds. He popped a handful into his mouth, chewed and swallowed, shells and all. "Over here," called X-Ray. The sack looked about half full. Magnet rolled up at the top, then tossed it to X-Ray. "How about you get them without Mr. Sir seeing you?" asked Armpit. "I can't help it," Magnet said. He had both his hands up, wiggled his fingers, and laughed. "My fingers are like little magnets." The sack from X-Ray to Armpit to Squid. "Sure to eat something that doesn't come from a can," said Armpit. Squid tossed the sack to Zigzag. Stanley knew it would come to him next. He didn't even want it. From the moment Magnet shouted, "Anybody want some sunflower seeds?" he knew that there would be trouble. Mr. Sir was sure to come back, and anyway, he salted shells would make him thirsty. "Coming your way, caveman," said Zigzag. "Airmail and special delivery." It's unclear whether the seeds spilled before they got to Stanley or after he dropped the bag. It seemed to him that Zigzag hadn't rolled up the top before throwing it, and that was the reason he didn't catch it. But it all happened very fast. One moment the sack was flying through the air, the next thing Stanley knew, the sack was in his hole, seeds were spilled across the dirt. "Oh man," said Magnet. "Sorry," Stanley said as he tried to sweep the seeds back into the sack. "I don't want to eat dirt," said X-Ray. Stanley didn't know what to do. "The truck's coming," shouted Zigzag. Stanley looked up at the approaching dust cloud, then back down at the spilled seeds. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What else is new? He dug his shovel into the hole and tried to turn over the dirt and bury the seeds. What should he have done, he realized later, was knock one of his dirt piles back into his hole. But the idea of putting dirt into the hole was unthinkable. "Hello, Mr. Sir," said X-Ray. "Back so soon?" "It seemed like you were just here," said Armpit. "Time flies when you're having fun," said Magnet. Stanley continued to turn the dirt over in his hole. "You Girl Scouts having a good time?" asked Mr. Sir. He was moved from one hole to another. He kicked the dirt pile by Magnet's hole and he moved towards Stanley. Stanley could see two seeds at the bottom of his hole. As he tried to cover them up, he unearthed the corner of the sack. "Well, what do you know, caveman?" said Mr. Sir, standing over him. "Looks like you found something." Stanley didn't know what to do. "Dig it out," said Mr. Sir. "We'll take it to the warden. Maybe she'll give you the rest of the day off." "It's not anything," Stanley muttered. "Let me be the judge of that," said Mr. Sir. Stanley reached down and pulled up the anti-burlap sack. He tried to hand it to Mr. Sir, but he wouldn't take it. "So tell me, caveman," said Mr. Sir, "how did my sack of sunflower seeds get in your hole?" "I stole it from your truck." "You did?" "Yes, Mr. Sir." "What happened to all the sunflower seeds?" "I ate them." "By yourself?" "Yes, Mr. Sir." "Hey, caveman," shouted Armpit. "How come you didn't share any with us?" "That's cold, man," said X-Ray. "I thought you were our friend," said Magnet. Mr. Sir looked around from one board to another, then back to Stanley. "Well, see what the warden has to say about this. Let's go." Stanley climbed out of the hole and followed Mr. Sir to the truck. He filled the empty sack. It felt good to sit inside the truck without the direct rays of sun. Stanley was surprised how he could feel good without anything at the moment, but he did. It felt good to sit down in a comfortable seat for a change, and as the truck bounced along the dirt, he was able to appreciate the air blowing through the open window into his hot, sweaty face. Chapter 20. It felt good to walk in the shade of two oak trees. Stanley wondered as how the condemned man felt on his way to a lecture chair, pretending all the good things in his life for the last time. They had to step around the holes to get the cabin door. Stanley was surprised to see so many around the cabin. He would have expected the warden to not want campers digging close to their home, but several holes were right up against the cabin wall. The holes were closer together here as well, and there were different shapes and sizes. Mr. Sir knocked on the door. Stanley still held the empty sacks. "Yes," Warden said, opening the door. "There's been a little trouble out on the lake," Mr. Sir said. "Caveman will tell you all about it." The warden stared at Mr. Sir at a moment, then her gaze turned to Stanley. He felt nothing but dread now. Come in, I suppose, said the warden. You're letting the cold out. It was air-conditioned inside the cabin. The television was going. She picked up the remote and turned it off. She sat down on the canvas chair and was barefoot, wearing shorts. Her legs were as freckled as her face and arms. So what is... You have to tell me. Stanley took a breath to steady himself. While Mr. Sir was filling the canteens, I snuck into the truck and stole a sack of sunflower seeds. I see. She turned to Mr. Sir. That's why you brought him here? Yes, but I think he's lying. I think someone else stole the sack, and Caveman was covering up for X-Ray or somebody. It was a 20-pound sack, and he claims to have eaten it all by himself. He took the sack from Stanley and handed it to the warden. I see, the warden said again. The sack wasn't full, said Stanley, and I spilled a lot. You can check my hole. In that room, Caveman, there's small flowered case. Will you get it for me, please? She pointed to the door. Stanley looked at the door, then the warden, then back to the door. He slowly walked toward it. It was some kind of dressing room with a sink and a mirror. Next to the sink, we saw a case, white with pink roses. He brought it back out to the warden and set it on the glass coffee table in front of her. She unclasped the latch and opened the case. It was a makeup case. Stanley's mother had one similar to it. She saw several bottles of nail polish, polish remover, and a couple of lipstick tubes, and the other jars were powders. The warden held up a small jar of dark red nail polish. You see this, Caveman? He nodded. This is my special nail polish. Do you see any dark rich color? You can't buy that in a store. You have to make it by myself. But Stanley had no idea what she was going to show him. He was wondering why a warden would ever need to wear nail polish or makeup. Do you want to know my secret ingredients? He raised and lowered one shoulder. The warden opened the bottle. Rattlesnake venom. With a small paintbrush, she began applying it to her nails on her left hand. It's perfectly harmless when it's dry. She finished her left hand. She waved it in the air for a few seconds and then began painting the nails on her right hand. It's only toxic while it's wet. She finished painting her nails, then stood up. She reached over and touched Stanley's face with her fingers. She ran her sharp, wet nails very gently down his neck. He felt his skin tingle. The nail of her pinky was barely touched by the wound behind his ear. The sharp sting of pain caused him to jump back. The warden turned his face to Mr. Sir, who was sitting on the fireplace hearth. So, you think we stole your sunflower seeds? No, he says he stole them. But I think it was. She stepped toward him and struck him across the face. Mr. Sir stared at her. He had 3 long red marks slanting across the left side of his face. Stanley didn't know if the redness was caused by her nail polish or his blood. It took a moment for the venom to sink in. Suddenly, Mr. Sir screamed and clutched his face with both hands. He let himself fall over, rolling off a hearth onto the rug. The warden spoke softly. I don't especially care about your sunflower seeds, Mr. Sir moaned. But if you must know, said the warden, I liked it better when you smoked. For a second, Mr. Sir's pain seemed to recede. He took several long, deep breaths. Then his head jerked violently, and he let out a shrill scream, worse than the one before. The warden turned to Stanley. I suggest you go back to your hole now. Stanley started to go, but Mr. Sir lay in the way. Stanley could see the muscles on his face jump and twitch. His body writhed in agony. Stanley stepped carefully over. Is he? Excuse me? Said the warden. Stanley was so frightened to speak. He's not going to die, said the warden said. Unfortunately for you. Chapter 21. It was a long walk back to his hole. Stanley looked out through the haze of the heat and dirt and the other boys, lowering and raising their shovels. Group D was the farthest away, and he realized once again he would be digging long after everyone else had quit. He hoped he'd finish before Mr. Sir recovered. He didn't want to be out there alone with Mr. Sir. He won't die, the warden said, unfortunately for you. Walking across the desolate wasteland, Stanley thought it was his great-grandfather, not the pig stealer, but the pig stealer's son, the one who was robbed by kissing Kate Barlow. He tried to imagine how he must have felt as the kissing Kate had left him stranded in the desert. Probably wasn't a whole lot different from the way he himself felt now. Kate Barlow had a great-grandfather the face of the hot, barren desert. The warden had left Stanley to face Mr. Sir. Somehow, this great-grandfather had survived the 17 days before he was rescued by a couple of rattlesnake hunters. He was insane when they found him. When he was asked how long he lived, he said he found refuge on God's thumb. He spent nearly a month in the hospital. He ended up marrying one of the nurses. Nobody ever knew what he meant by God's thumb, including himself. Stanley heard the twitching sound. He stopped at mid-step and one foot still in the air. The rattlesnake lay coiled beneath his foot. Its tail was pointing upward, rattling. Stanley backed his leg away, then turned and ran. The rattlesnake didn't chase after him. It was rattle its tail to warn him to stay away. Thanks for the warning, Stanley whispered as his heart pounded. The rattlesnake would not be a lot more dangerous if it didn't have a rattle. Hey, caveman, called Armpit. You still alive? What did the warden say? Asked X-Ray. What did you tell her? Asked Magnet. I told her I stole the seeds, said Stanley. Good going, said Magnet. What did she do? Said Zigzag. Stanley shrugged one shoulder. Nothing. She got mad at Mr. Sir for bothering her. He didn't feel like going into details. He didn't want to talk about it, and then maybe it didn't happen. He went over to his hole, but his surprise was nearly finished. He stared at it amazed. It didn't make sense, or perhaps it did. He smiled since he had to take the blame for the sunflower seeds. He realized the other boys had dug his hole for him. "Hey, thanks," he said. "Don't look at me," said X-Ray. Confused, Stanley looked around from Magnet to arm, picked a zigzag to Squid. None of them took credit for it, and then he turned to Zero, the one who quietly digging his hole since Stanley returned. Zero's hole was smaller than all the others. Chapter 22. Stanley was the first one finished. He spat in his hole, then shoved and changed into a cleaner set of clothes. It had been 3 days since laundry was done, so even his clean set was dirty and smelly. Tomorrow these would become his work clothes, and the other set would be washed. He could think no reason why Zero would dig his hole for him. Zero didn't even get any sunflower seeds. "I guess he likes to dig holes," Armpit had said. "He's a mole," Zigzag said. "I think he eats dirt." "Moles don't eat dirt," X-Ray had pointed out. "Worms eat dirt." "Hey, Zero," Squid had asked, "are you a mole or a worm?" Zero said nothing. Stanley never even thanked him, but now he sat in his cot and waited for Zero to return to the shower room. "Thanks," said Zero, entered through the tent flap. Zero glanced at him and then went over to the crates, where he disposed his dirty clothes and towel. "Why'd you help me?" Stanley asked. Zero turned around. "You didn't steal the sunflower seeds," he said. "So neither did you," said Stanley. Zero stared at him. His eyes seemed to expand, and it was almost as if Zero were looking right through him. "You didn't steal the sneakers," he said. Stanley said nothing. He watched Zero walk out of the tent, as if anybody had X-ray vision. It was Zero. "Wait," he called, then hurried out after him. Zero had stopped outside of the tent, and Stanley almost ran into him. "I tried to teach you to read if you want," Stanley offered. "I don't know if I know how to teach, but I'm not that worn out today, since you dug a lot of my hole." A big smile spread across Zero's face, and he turned to the tent and was less likely to be bothered. Stanley had got a box of stationery and a pen out of his crate. They sat on the ground. "Do you know the alphabet?" Stanley asked. For a second, he thought he saw a flash of defiance in Zero's eyes, but then he pressed. "I think I know some of it," Zero said. "A, B, C, D. Keep going," said Stanley. Zero's eyes looked upward. "E, F," said Stanley. "G," said Zero. He blew some air out of the side of his mouth. "H, I, K, P. H-I-J-K-L, Stanley said. "That's right," said Zero. "I've heard it before, I just don't have it memorized exactly." "That's all right," said Stanley. "Here, I'll say the whole thing, just to refresh your memory. Then you could try it." He recited the alphabet for Zero, then Zero repeated it out without a single mistake. "Not bad for a kid who's never seen Sesame Street." "Well, I've heard it before somewhere," Zero said, trying to act like it was nothing, but he gave his big smile and gave him away. The next step was harder. Stanley had to figure out how to teach him to recognize each letter. He gave Zero a piece of paper and took a piece for himself. "I guess we'll start with A." He printed as a capital A, and then Zero copied it on a sheet of paper. The paper wasn't lined, which made it a little difficult, but Zero's A wasn't bad. It was just a little big. Stanley told him he needed to write smaller, or else they'd run out of paper real quick. Zero printed it smaller. "Actually, there's 2 ways to write each letter," Stanley said, as he realized this was going to even be harder than he thought. "That's a capital A, but usually you only see small a. You only have capitals at the beginning of words, and only if it's in the start of a sentence. It is proper noun, like a name." Zero nodded as if he understood, but Stanley knew he had made very little sense. He printed a lowercase a, and Zero copied it. And there are 52, said Zero. Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. Instead of 26 letters, there's actually 52. Stanley looked at him, surprised. "I guess that's right. How'd you figure that out?" he asked. Zero said nothing. "Did you add?" Zero said nothing. "Did you multiply?" "It's just how many there are," said Zero. Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. He didn't even know Zero knew where 26 in the first place. How did you count them if you recited them? He had Zero write a few more upper and lowercase a's, and then he moved to capital B. It was going to take a long time, he realized. And then he teach me 10 letters a day, suggested Zero. 5 capitals, 5 smalls. After 5 days, I'd know them all. Except for the last day, I have to do 12. 6 capitals and 6 smalls. Again, Stanley stared at him, amazed as he was able to figure all that out. Zero must have thought I was starving for a different reason, because he said, "I'll dig your part of the hole every day. I can dig about an hour. When you teach me for an hour, and since I'm faster digger anyways, our holes will be done at the same time. I won't have to wait for you." "Okay," Stanley agreed. As Zero printed his B's, Stanley asked him if he figured out it would take 5 days. "Did you multiply? Did you divide?" "It's just what it is," Zero said. "It's good math," said Stanley. "I'm not stupid," Zero said. "I just know everybody thinks I am. I just don't like answering their questions." Later that day, he lay in his cot. Stanley reconsidered the deal he made with Zero, giving a break every day he had relief. But he knew X-Ray wouldn't like it. He wondered if there would be some way Zero could agree to dig part of X-Ray's holes as well. And then again, why would he? I'm the one teaching Zero. I need a break so I'll have the energy to teach him. I'm the one who took the blame for the sunflower seeds. I'm the one who Mr. Sird is mad at. He closed his eyes and images from Warden's cabin floated in his head. Red fingernails, Mr. Sird writhing on the floor, flowered makeup kit. He opened his eyes. He suddenly realized there had been a gold tube before. He'd seen it in the mother's bathroom, and then seen it again in the warden's cabin. It was half of a lipstick container. KB. 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 He felt a jolt of astonishment. His mouth suddenly formed the name Kate Barlow, as he wondered why it could have been the kissing outlaw. Chapter 23. 110 years ago, Green Lake was the largest lake in Texas. It was full of clear blue water, and it sparkled like a giant emerald in the sun. It was especially beautiful in the spring, with peach trees which lined the shore, bloomed with pink and rose-colored blossoms. There was always town picnic on the 4th of July. They played games, danced, sing, swim to the lake, and keep cool. Prizes were awarded the best peach pie and peach jam. Special prize was given every year to Miss Catherine Barlow for her famous spiced peaches. No one even tried to make spiced peaches because they knew none would be as delicious as hers. Every summer, Miss Catherine had picked bushels of peaches and preserved them in jars with cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and other spices which she kept secret. The jarred peaches would last all winter. They probably would have lasted longer than that, but they were always eaten by the end of the winter. It was said that Green Lake was heaven on earth, and was that Miss Catherine's spiced peaches were food for the angels. Catherine Barlow was the town's only school teacher. She taught in one old room schoolhouse, and old even then. The roof leaked, the windows wouldn't open, the door hung crooked on its bent hinges. It was a wonderful teacher, full of knowledge and full of life. The children loved her. She taught classes for the evening for adults, and many of the adults loved her as well. She was pretty. Her classes were often full of young men who were a lot more interested in the teacher than they were getting an education. But all they ever got was an education. One such young man was Trout Walker. His real name was Charles Walker, but everyone called him Trout because his 2 feet smelled like a couple of dead fish. It was entirely Trout's fault. He had an incurable foot fungus. In fact, it was the same foot fungus that 110 years later would afflict the famous ball player Clyde Livingston. But at least Clyde Livingston showered every day. "I take a bath every Sunday morning," Trout would brag, "whether I need to or not." Most everyone in town in Green Lake expected Miss Catherine to marry Trout Walker. He was the son of the richest man in the country. The family owned most of the peach trees, all the land on the east side of the lake. Trout often showed up at the night school and never paid attention. He talked in class, he was disrespectful to students around him, and he was loud and stupid. A lot of men in town were not educated. That didn't bother Miss Catherine. She knew they would spend most of their lives working on farms and ranches, but it hadn't much schooling. That was why she was there, to teach them. But Trout wouldn't want to learn. He seemed to be proud of his stupidity. "How'd you like to take a ride on a new boat this Saturday?" he asked one of her evening after class. "No, thank you, Miss Catherine. We got a brand new boat," he said. "You don't even have to row it." "Yes, I know," Miss Catherine said. Everyone in town had seen and heard the Walker's new boat. It had been horrible, loud noises spewed ugly black smoke over the beautiful lake. Trout had always gotten everything he ever wanted. He found it hard to believe that Miss Catherine had turned him down. He pointed his finger at her and said, "No one ever says no to Charles Walker." "I believe I just did," said Catherine Barlow. And that's the end of that. And I actually did my numbering like I used to do my numbering. Oopsies. That was on me. But yeah. So next time we're actually reading pages 104. Oop, it's the second movement. Woo! To to 123. Now let me check. There's 123 to the what's it called? That's 127. 123 is the last page of that, and it's the last page of part 1. Ooh, have fun. But yeah, so that's going to be the end of that. So I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful day. People like being fishing. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.